Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Imagine standing at the start line of one of the toughest ultra marathons in the country, not as a runner, but as a spectator. You are over 250 pounds, out of shape, and far from the athlete you once were. You watch the runners take off into the distance, and in that moment, something inside you shifts. You turn to your mentor and make a bold declaration. Next year, I will be here and I will run this race. For most, this would be a fleeting thought, but for Tara Tulley, it became a mission. Her journey to that moment wasn't easy. Tara got married at 19 and became a mother of three. In those years, she battled postpartum depression, anxiety, and an eating disorder. She struggled with cycles of weight gain and loss, trying to hold on to running while navigating the demands of raising a family. Then in 2010, she was diagnosed with POTS, an autonomic nervous system disorder that left her unable to even get off the couch some days. Doctors told her that she had a 25% chance of being permanently disabled. They said she would have to live with extreme limitations, but Tara refused to accept that fate. In 2019, after a painful divorce and major life upheaval, she found herself in survival mode. She stopped running, she gained over 100 pounds. Her body felt like it was breaking down. But when she made that promise at the start line of the Route 66 Ultra, something ignited inside her. She spent the next year reclaiming her life. She lost 130 pounds. She trained relentlessly. She rewired her mind using the power of positive affirmations, surrounding herself with the right mentors, and proving that the biggest battle isn't against the body, it's against the mind. Then, 1 year later, she returned, not as a spectator, but as a competitor. She ran 140 grueling miles through pain, exhaustion, and self doubt, crossing that finish line as a completely transformed person. Tara's story is about so much more than weight loss. It's about human resilience. It's about defying expectations, whether they come from doctors, society, or even our own inner demons. It's about becoming your own biggest advocate, putting in the work, and never letting go of your vision even when the odds are stacked against you. If you have ever felt like your goals were out of reach, this episode will show you just how much is possible when you commit fully to your vision. Let's get into it. Tara, welcome to the show.
I'm in Gila Bend, Arizona. I always put collagen in my coffee. So I do about 30 grams of collagen in my coffee. And then today I had a half a bagel with 2 eggs and cheese. And what else did I have? An orange?
Sounds like a nutritious breakfast, which covers, maybe different food groups and also some specific supplements. Would love to dive deeper into your into your nutritional practices
Uh-huh.
as we get into this conversation. Tara, how old are you?
I am 37 and a half. Or no, 47 and a half. Sorry.
Okay, well, you don't look more than 40, so
That's great. And according to my Garmin, I'm 42. So
oh, I didn't know that the Garmin smartwatch appliance it has this some sort of indicator on based on your parameters, like how well you're performing.
yeah, and your VO2 max and all of that, and your weight, it takes all that into consideration. So 2 years ago, it said I was 52. So now it says I'm 42.
Wow,
So I've lost 10 years. So
wow, that's incredible. Well, I did not realize that these smartwatch makers had got on to this longevity gamification bandwagon.
yeah.
I heard about you from Lisa, who I had on the podcast recently. And, when I heard about your story from her, how you realized your vision and what you accomplished, which would seem unthinkable to many. I was completely blown over, and I knew I had to bring you onto the show, Tara. So can you talk about, or can you walk us through, what is it that you accomplished?
So I used to run ultras prior to 2019. And then in 2019, I kind of went through, I'd say, a catastrophic life change where I was uprooted from where I was living. I went through a divorce. I went through a lot. And I just stopped running and stopped for a while, just stopped caring about health because I was kind of in survival mode. And so I put on over 100 pounds. And I'm only 5'4". So at my high weight, I was about 270. And I started having high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I was retaining a lot of fluid, a lot of water. So I had a lot of just symptoms going on, a lot of chronic fatigue. And so in December of 2023, I had started working where I'm working now, probably 6 months prior to that, which is the San Lucie district of the Tohono Nation. And we were at an employee party, and I'm not like big into New Year's resolutions because I think if you're going to set a goal, then it needs to be like a commitment that's going to just, be for more than a month. But I also have, at that point, I had done a lot of, I think, spiritual healing and trying to, I try to not say things unless I mean it, unless I intend on doing it. So I said at the employee party that I was going to lose 100 pounds. And so that was just over 2 years ago. So I started making small changes at first, just moving more. And then I guess it was probably July of 2023, I really got more serious about it. I cut out all wheat and all sugar for about a year and a half at the start. And then I had worked with Lisa prior years before, but I started talking to Lisa again and started working with her again. And so when I got to the start line of which she had come down to the Route 66 start line that year in November, I think I had lost about 20 pounds at that point. But I was sitting at a table with Dr. Bob Howe and Lisa, and she said something like, "Oh, you could do this race." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to do it next year." And I almost couldn't believe I said it, but but it really kind of pushed me into, okay, now I really got to get serious. So when I committed to it, I spent the whole year.
Hang on. So this moment is kind of monumental. And that's what Lisa spoke of. So can you take us to that moment Tara, on where were you? What is this race? And what made you come up with this deep resolve that you were going to lose a certain amount of weight to complete this massive race? So take it to that moment.
It really was just at the beginning of my journey. And I was like, it was kind of discouraging for me because when I started back into running, you have to kind of put aside what you used to be able to do. I was walking maybe a 23-minute mile and maybe up to a 20-minute mile at that point. I wasn't very fast. So I realized, okay, I have to get a lot faster if I'm actually going to do this race because, and so I think, we were sitting at breakfast that morning, and Dr. Bottle and Lisa were talking, and I think just the energy from, seeing the runners, remembering what it was like to actually be in a race. I hadn't raced in more than 5 years at that point. Like, it just kind of brought that back, like that feeling back of like, what it feels like to be part of a race and to accomplish something. And because you have to really dig deep to finish a race like that, or to even show up at the start line. And Lisa always says something that, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. So I guess in that moment, something just like clicked in my brain of like, okay, I need a goal that's big enough that's going to scare me into being more committed. Because if you don't have a big goal, you can, like a purpose, I guess, something to focus on, then, if it's just to lose weight or just to get fit, then you're not going to push yourself as hard. So when I committed to that, like, I just had that fear of like, okay, well, I just said I'm going to do it. And then there's that. And then if you fail, then, I understand there's legitimate reasons for not finishing races, but if you didn't put all your effort into your training and your diet and everything and you fail, then, that's on you. So something just like, I guess, lit up.
So fair enough. So let's see. So yeah. So Lisa, who we had on this podcast earlier, Lisa is, and at that point was your running coach,
right?
If I understand.
Yeah.
And what prompted you to visit the start line of this huge ultra marathon race? And then, so how, if I can ask a very direct question, what did you weigh at that time?
I think I was exactly like 251 pounds at that point.
Okay, so you were 251 pounds and you visited, and what made you want to visit the start line of that race? Did you, in the back of your mind, had you already started envisioning, dreaming of completing this race at some point, or did you just want to visit it with lesser ambitions?
Well, because Lisa had contacted me, because Marshall had asked her to go up to the start line. That's initially why I went, because I was taking her there. But I had also read Marshall's book several years ago. So I was kind of inspired, like, okay, I get to meet Marshall because I was really inspired by his story. I would love to do a transcontinental. Like, that's been a dream in the back of my head since like 2013.
Just interjecting to let you guys know that we are talking about the famous Route 66, 140-mile long ultramarathon that started in 1926 and takes place in Arizona. And Marshall is Marshall Ulrich, legendary ultra runner who wrote this incredible book, Running Across America, and other books as well. And he was also on the podcast some time back. Okay, back to the show.
I would love to do a transcontinental. Like, that's been a dream in the back of my head since like 2013. So that was part of it. Like, I didn't even know about the race. So I didn't specifically have in mind that I was going to do this race. But because Lisa was going up there and it was an opportunity to be part of it is how I ended up there.
So, for lack of a better word, you were similar to a tourist.
Yeah, at that point.
You were inspired by Marshall's book. Yeah, Marshall is Ultr's total legend, and so is Lisa. So you accepted this invite. You came up to the start line of the race. At that point, you were 251 pounds. Describe to us that point where you made this commitment. What was going through your mind? Like, what inspired you? And then what made you think that, yes, this is something I want to commit to?
I think we had gone out to breakfast after the race had officially started. So I was there at the start line, and I did the first mile with them out of town. I think just being there and remembering what it's like to be in a race, and then also kind of like reawakening that dream. Like, I don't know, I believe like that's something that like God put in me, like that idea in 2013. Like someday I want to run across the nation, I want to across the country. That's still something I want to do. And so, like, well, if you've got that dream, you've got to do something. You've got to do something like this to get there, because it's going to take a lot of work and there's a lot of steps in between. So why not start here?
That sounds incredible. You know, just having that gumption, maybe even that self-belief, Tara, that you felt you were capable of realizing this vision for yourself. And yeah, maybe what Tara said, what Lisa said, is true, that if a dream is not scary enough, then maybe it's not like big enough, or it's not a real dream. Okay, so you came back, and we will talk more about that detail later, but you came back next year, and you came as a different person, and you completed this ultra marathon that you had promised to yourself. Okay, we will go through some of those things later, but going back into your journey, Tara, I want to start at the beginning. Before you ever thought about, before the life changes, before the weight shifts, what was your relationship with movement and fitness? Were you active as a kid? Were you a natural runner? Or did this come much later?
Well, the funny thing is, I don't know that I'm a natural born runner, but when I was 7 years old, there was, where I grew up, something called 50-20. And it was something that, like the Boy Scouts, and it was a big thing where I grew up in Utah, where they started this is the place monument in Salt Lake City, and would walk from there to Provo every year. And so I had watched this I remember watching this when I was a kid and telling my dad, I want to do that. And I think I was there was something in me that really wanted to do it. And so he agreed to let me sign up for it, thinking that I'd probably make it a few miles and then give up. And so it was like 2 weeks before my 8th birthday, I participated in that, and I made it 35 miles. And I didn't want to quit, but I don't think my dad expected me to go that far. And so I remember being like really disappointed, because I really wanted that medal. I really wanted that finisher's medal. So I think I would say, I guess that was my first ultra experience when I was 7.
Wow. You ended up running 35 miles at 7.
Well, I was walking.
Completely...
I mean, it was mostly walking, but yeah.
Okay. Where did this come from? Like, the desire to take part in something this next level at that young of an age?
Well, I think I had seen, I had watched people finish that, and I had watched the awards presentation, and I'd seen them get this little medal for completing it. And I was like, I really want one of those. And so there was just something in me that got stuck in my head, and I really wanted that. And so I did 35 miles of it, and then my dad made me quit. And I just remember being really, really disappointed, seeing that I didn't get that medal. And then I didn't really, but back then I didn't even know what a marathon was or what an ultra was. So I didn't really think about doing something like that again until I did my first marathon when I was 30. I did Desert News Marathon, was my first marathon in 2007.
Tara, just going back, staying with that for a second. So you did 35 miles. So I missed this part. So this was like a 50 miler?
Yeah, it was a 50-20. So it's 50 miles and you have to do it in 20 hours.
I see. And this was like a run or a race in your city, your town. Like, how did you even find out about it?
It was a big thing with the Boy Scout groups, and my parents were really involved in Boy Scouting. And so it was something that all the Boy Scout groups would participate in every year. So it was a big annual thing that would have been back in the 80s. And they would go from Salt Lake City to Provo. And it was every year. I don't remember what year it ended, but so it was just a big deal in our town.
I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode. Sure. You and I are about the same age. I'm actually going to be 47 next month. And when I was 7, I'm trying to think of what were the activities I was engaged in. I think in terms of sports, I think it was playing maybe some soccer, maybe, I don't know, some table sports. The idea of doing a long race like that or being inspired by would never have crossed my mind. Did you feel at that time that there was something different about you, that maybe other kids your age were not doing those things, and here you are questing to complete an ultra marathon?
Well, yeah, I think my interests were always I wanted to be on the big hikes. I wanted to do everything the Boy Scouts were doing. I didn't like doing all the girl things. I would always get upset because I'm like, why do all the girls groups, they do all these crafts and stuff? I want to be out hiking. Why don't all the girls want to go hiking and camping out? I want to do all that kind of stuff. So that's always been my being out in nature, being moving. It's part of my personality, I think.
Sure. And yeah, sounds like it was a perfect match there. Your exposure to the outdoors and to endurance activities through your family's engagement with the Boy Scouts met maybe this innate desire and talent you have for pushing yourself in the beautiful outdoors. And maybe that at 7, that was the first realization. So at 7 you did this. but then you didn't complete an ultra until you were 30. So what happened in those years?
Well, I had kind of dabbled in running here and there. I had a very active family, but parents are active. But I got married when I was 19 and I had 3 children. So just being a young mother at that time, that's a lot of work having 3 kids. But I suffered from postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. And so after my 3rd child was born, I was going through some of that still and going through some disordered eating. But then I found running, and I found that running actually changed my relationship with how I viewed my body, because I ran my first marathon and I realized that, I like that feeling of running, and it's therapeutic, and that I actually enjoyed how I felt when I ran. But you have to take care of your body for the longevity of running if you don't want your body to break down. So that really shifted a lot of things for me. And I did my first marathon in 2007. I really didn't know much about ultra running. I'd heard of the Wasatch 100 and never actually thought of doing it, but at that time. But I got to the end of the marathon and I thought, well, I think I could go further. And so I found another race. I did the Ogden Valley Marathon about 6 weeks after that. And then I was like, I really want to find another race. And there were no marathons that I could find when I was looking for one. But then I found there was this Ogden Valley 50 miler. So I thought, why not try it? And so that was my first ultra marathon, was in 2007. And I found that I really liked the slower pace, but also the more sense of community and kind of, I guess, the laid backness in ultra running, that there's really community there. There's a lot of just getting out there and enjoying it more than about, bragging rights or ego, and that the community is very supportive of each other. It doesn't matter if you're the slowest runner or the fastest runner, everybody's cheering you on and helping you out.
All right, that sounds like a very intense period of your life. You got married at 19. You had 3 kids. You also went through some mental challenges, postpartum depression, anxiety. How did you make time for running?
Well, I went when I was that age, I would get up sometimes 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to get my running in. Or I was married at the time, so sometimes it would be later at night too, when my husband would get home from work. But I just found that it was such an important part of my mental wellness that I had to make time for it, because it really, it wakes something up in me. But I would say now it's definitely a lot easier to train consistently than it was back then. So back then I was running and I was doing the races. I wasn't always consistent with my training.
And also, some of those health challenges you had, the anxiety and depression we spoke about. I think you also mentioned struggling with an eating disorder. How did those challenges shape your relationship with running and any other kind of movement? Do you think running helped with some of the things you were going through?
I think it did for me, because I think when I was really stuck in that negative mindset with my body, it was about punishing. It was like some sort of outlet. But when I shifted that into, I realized like running for me wasn't about punishment, that I enjoyed it. That like I started to value my body, where before I didn't value what my body could do. It shifted me into I valued my body, so it was something that I wanted to take care of, and to, because it's really amazing what the human body can do when you feed it properly. When you and now the way that I think now, when you foster those positive thoughts, and even like in what you say, that how your body responds to all that. And now I really understand that the value of the word and how you speak to your body, how you speak, and you can speak something negative and manifest that, or you can speak something positive, and whatever you speak gives energy and gives life.
Absolutely, yeah. The power of positive affirmations.
Right.
Can you give an example, Dora, of how you learned and then trained yourself to really harness the power of words?
Yeah, well, I think that's something that kind of came later. I'm not sure that I really even back then acknowledged it, but now it's something that I've really studied over the past few years. There's some spiritual mentors that I've just really gleaned a lot from. But I mean, one example, I'll give you an example of something that just happened yesterday, even that I had to catch myself in, is because of my history in the past of with the pots and everything, of not being able to finish races before and missing cutoffs. There's with my coach, with Lisa, I decided to sign up for a shorter race because I'm working on my speed, and some of that is still coming back, but I'm approaching it differently. And when I first signed up for this 50K I did yesterday, like some of that fear and anxiety came back of like, oh no, they have cutoffs at this point, they have cutoffs at that point. What if I'm too slow? And I had to catch myself because I told her, I said, I'm worried about it. And she's like, you need to get that out of your head. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I need to get that out of my head and stop saying that. I am fast enough. I am going to make the cutoffs. And so, but that was just something recently where, like a little change in how I was thinking about it and what I was saying. I started saying that, yes, I'm fast enough. And so in my training, even in the few weeks leading up to it, I visualized, and I kept saying every time I would do like my heel repeats, I'm fast enough. And I was fast enough yesterday. It's something that's like, speed is not something I've been good at in the past because of the pots, but now it's something that I'm overcoming. And I was fast enough yesterday. But it all starts with our words and what we're feeding. And then because then we start thinking differently, we start training differently.
I love this, Dora. And I think we could all stand to learn a little bit from your tools that you have developed. So these words that you have, can you just talk us through that process? Do you write those words down? Do you have like maybe stickers around your house where as you walk by, then they remind you that this is what you need to be saying and thinking?
Well, yeah, actually, so one of my spiritual mentors that when I first started really doing this a few years ago was Patricia King. She wrote a book called The Power of Decree. And I use scripture, and I go off of like based on scripture. So I'll find like a word, a scripture that talks about whatever problem I'm trying to overcome. And then I'll go off that and I'll write like a decree or an affirmation. And my house that I lived in Tucson, I actually had these all over the wall over the house. And whenever I would start to like think negatively, I would go and I would read them on the walls. I would read them out loud. I read them. And then it really worked. I mean, it got me out of some negative thinking with some of the things I was going through at the time. It got me. And then, like one of them was finances, where I was like needing finances. I would start writing things about like paying off debt or whatever. And then, there would be people would bless me with money, or I'd have extra job that I wasn't planning on. And so, but it all starts with how we're thinking, what we're saying, and aligning ourselves with those words, because we make this, and, it's not just, doesn't just magically happen, but it's like, when you start saying it, you start getting ideas, or you start aligning yourself differently. Then if you're negative, you start seeing opportunities, or you start making decisions and choices that align with what you're saying, what your affirmation is, what your decree is.
Powerful. And okay, let's talk about again your journey through those years. I believe in 2007, you ran your first marathon, and then you followed up with another marathon, and then a 50-miler. So, and then you talked about how when you felt like you could keep going further. Can you speak mindset at that point? What was it about you at that time? And what made you think that you were this capable, this strong to have not only completed the run, but had the energy to just keep going?
Well, I think I have some kind of innate need to see what my limit is and see if there is a limit. And I also don't like, I've always kind of been this way. Like if I failed at something, or if I wasn't able to complete it, and somebody tells me, "Oh, maybe you just can't do that," there's something in me that rebels and has to prove, like, no, I really can do this. And so, so I don't know if it's something about, like, to prove somebody wrong. And I don't know that, like, you don't get to tell me, you don't get to put these limits on me. You don't get to tell me what I am and am not capable of. So when I was hit with POTS, for example, in 2010, and had some challenges with that, I had already, like, a trip plan to summit Kilimanjaro 6 months after I was hit with that health condition. And what the internet was telling me was, oh, well, people with POTS have, at that time, there wasn't a lot of research on POTS. But, you have maybe a 25% chance of being permanently disabled, and people with POTS have exercise intolerance, and are going to live with the quality of life with somebody with congestive or congestive heart disease. And there was something in me that just said, no, that's not going to be me. Like, I had to prove that wrong. That wasn't going to be me, and I was going to summit that mountain. And so I went from almost being bedridden to finding a doctor that supported me, that had, in her own clinical experience, actually found that people with POTS who pursued intense exercise actually fared better and were able to overcome. And I worked with a specialized dietitian at that time too, to figure out my body's specific nutrient needs. And we had to do a lot of testing and trial and error, but I did summit that mountain 6 months later. And not only did I summit the mountain, but there were 5 people in my family that went. My parents, my brother, and my ex-husband. I was the only one who was able to make it to the top of that mountain. And it was, I think, because I had done months and months of preparation, and I had made that affirmation, I am going to do it. And I know my body also has these challenges, so I'm going to figure out what I need to overcome these challenges before I even go. So I knew what I needed for hydration. I knew what I needed for nutrition to support my body, and I summited the mountain.
Tara, what is POTS?
So POTS stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It's a disorder of the autonomic nervous system. there's different types of POTS. I have hyperagenic POTS, and I already say I had because I don't want to claim it. I believe I've been healed from it for the most part. But basically, my body was releasing too much norepinephrine, and so that affected my heart rate, my breathing, my ability to absorb electrolytes and nutrients. So I was finding that I would get dehydrated really fast. I would become hyponatremic on races. And now I understand too more in the feel what my fueling needs are. So there was a lot of races where I had to figure out my body where I couldn't finish because I hadn't figured out yet what my body needed to keep going. I have probably higher hydration needs, higher electrolyte needs than the average runner. I have to carry a lot more with me. I have to manage my core body temperature in the heat. But because I know that, and because I've done now a lot of like trial and error, I can go out in the Arizona heat when it's 116 for hours and be okay because I've learned what my body needs and I learned what I need to carry with me to manage that. And so, and my body is actually a lot healthier now. I don't have a lot of the symptoms I was having in 2010. And a lot of that has also been, I think, through the spiritual and emotional healing that I've done over the years, because our mind affects our bodies. And when we heal emotionally, it actually, lowers the inflammation in our bodies. There's a physiological change that happens in our bodies. So I really don't have a lot of the same symptoms I had back then.
Tara, I find this story amazing that, first of all, it's so cool that you went on this big adventure to Mount Kilimanjaro and you brought along your entire family. I'm curious, was that your brainchild to do this trip with your family?
That was my brainchild. My dad, he's a businessman, and he had a business that he sold back at that time, and he decided he wanted to take each of his 8 children and their spouses on whatever their dream trip was. So we got to choose where we wanted to go, each of my siblings. So I said Kilimanjaro. And so that was my brainchild.
That is great. And then also, you were experiencing this illness. I'm guessing your father and others were aware of that. I'm just wondering, what was that process like for them to, well, first understand that you were here trying to undertake this big trek or hiking trip to the top of this mountain? First, were they concerned about your health status and your ability to keep up as somebody who was going to be leading this trip?
I don't know if they really totally understood what I was going through with POTS at the time. I mean, they knew about it, but I don't think anybody really did, because POTS was so unknown at the time. I was misdiagnosed with all kinds of things before I finally got the right diagnosis. But also my parents have really, I think that's where I get that from, don't set limits on yourself, because my parents have really embraced the same, don't put limits on yourself. And if you want to do it, go pursue it, find a way. So I think especially my mom, she's very much that way. So that's probably where I've gotten a lot of it from, a lot of that value from.
One thing that certainly stands out in your journey, Tara, is that you also sought out and recruited this, let's say, this army of healers, coaches, nutrition experts, etc. I find that very powerful. How did you decide to go out and start looking for expert help?
Well, because I always believe that there's no way that we could study one thing our whole life and never be an expert in it. There's always more to learn, and there's always somebody that is better or knows more than I do. And I want to surround myself with people that are more knowledgeable or better than me, that will push me, because that's what's going to make me better. There's that saying that you become like the 5 closest people to you, because you pick up on their attitudes, you pick up on their, and so I'm always looking for somebody that's better than me that can push me to the next level. And the only way you get that is by searching that out and getting out of your comfort zone.
And was that realization always there from the beginning, or did you learn that over time that, hey, if I get these kinds of people in these fields, they would help me push past these limits?
I don't know that I consciously always recognize that, but I think that's something that, I've always done. If I'm really interested in something, and it's like, there's an internal fire that I really want to do this, I've always been driven to search that out. So I think that's something innate, but I think that conscious recognition is something that I've really become more, I think, aware of and conscious of the last few years. I'm very, especially since I've really been trying to refine this, like what you say, the power of your words. I think I'm especially more cognizant of that now, and that I'm careful about who I allow in my inner circle, who I allow to speak into my life.
Amazing. And then I think there is a lot of learning here for the rest of us. For listeners who might be feeling stuck, whether it is their fitness journey, their health, or a personal struggle, do you have a message for them? Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this.
I think, anything you want to do in life that's important to you, there is a way it can be done, even if you have to do it differently. And it may not, you have to let go of the image of what you think it has to look like, and embrace what you want as a journey. Because, there's paraplegic athletes out there who look like they shouldn't be able to run marathons, and yet if they really have that inner fire and that inner drive, I don't even know who it is, but I was watching this about this guy that was told he would never walk again, and watched that he went and finished a marathon, and he was holding 2 walking sticks, and it took him, several hours, but he finished it. So, that looks different than the elite athlete that broke the course record on the course I was on yesterday and did that mountain 50K in 3 hours and 40 minutes. But to me, when I look at that guy who's with the walking sticks, that's a success, because what did he have to overcome to do what he did differently, when he could have just accepted the diagnosis of you're never going to walk again? He didn't accept it. So we accept a lot of things in our lives. And a lot of it's from well-meaning people. But if there's something that you really want to do, yeah, I believe there's a solution out there. There's a way to do it. But let go of the image of what that has to look like, and don't compare yourself to somebody else's journey, because your success is going to inspire somebody, and your success doesn't have to be the 3-hour marathon finish. It might be that you got up, you said, no, I'm not going to accept this, and you ran a 10-hour marathon on walking stick. So,
Absolutely. I mean, that is so true indeed. What may be, Tara, that first step? The biggest journeys start with that first step. So for somebody who's struggling, what could be that first step towards regaining control and moving forward?
well, I mean, I think writing is a really powerful tool. So you write, like, pay attention to your thoughts, and just start changing your language. Like, if you start catching yourself on, because a lot of us are we grow up with so many negative messages that chatterbox in our head is telling us we're not good enough, we're not, and start challenging yourself. When you're hearing that thought of, who am I to do this anyway? Start challenging yourself, like write out an opposite affirmation, and then start saying that out loud, and then start noticing how your thoughts change.
Tara, it's funny. You could be reading my mind, because I was walking through this market in Mexico this morning, and I bought myself a new journal, because I have fallen off my journaling practice, and I bought myself a new journal so I could start writing again. And as I was eating lunch today, I penned my first journal entry in this diary. So I have taken your words to heart, and I hope to continue iterating on this writing practice, because I do agree that when one writes, it helps process our thoughts. And there's something powerful about that, because I think we internalize in some way what we write. It stays with us. You were battling these conditions, yet you had these these goals that you were working towards. And we talked a little bit about defying expectations. And I feel like people, who are struggling with some of the things you described, sometimes they get oppressed by others around them, by society. So could you speak a little bit more about some of the voices around you that you had to fight through, and talk a bit about, like, who were your doubters, and maybe also who were your supporters?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being on a race once where I couldn't finish, and somebody picked me up and just was kind of joking and said, "Oh, it's her. She's the famous DNFer." So I got labeled as the famous DNFer. But, those people don't know what I've had to struggle through just to be able to get as far in the race as I have. It's just like little things like that, when you don't know what somebody else's struggles are. And so on the surface, um, what looks like, oh, this is like this person's constantly showing up and they're constantly not able to finish, without knowing all the background. People are going to see that over and over again, and then, that's a pattern. So, then it also becomes a pattern in yourself, like almost an expectation of, like, well, this is just how it is. And you can either accept that, or you can look at, like, okay, what is the solution? Why does this pattern keep happening? Because you start to believe those things, right? Like, even the things you tell yourself, like, I'm not good at this, but you can say I'm not good at this, or you can, like, say, but if you keep saying that to yourself, then that's what you're going to give life to. Like, I'm not good about this. My body is just like this. There's nothing, I just have to accept that I have these limitations. Or the way that I approach it now is, okay, there might be some differences in my body. And so maybe my body works differently and I have to figure out what's going to work for my body. But it's not because I'm not good at this. It's just because I have to find the right solution for my body to be at my best. And so it's just like little things like that that sometimes are nuanced. But, so that's just one example of like, believing that lie or believing the things that they call them word curses people are putting on us. Like there's a book called The Four Agreements. And I think that book was really one of the first books that I was exposed to, where it talks about like be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally. And then he talks about like, whatever you agree to in a belief that becomes an agreement, and you have to break those agreements of those things that you're believing, those things that you bought into. So, like that's kind of the first step is look at like what you're agreeing with, look at what people are saying about you or what you're saying about yourself. Cause sometimes it's like most of the times it's what we're saying about ourselves. Like most people are, they're not even caring about your race. They're caring about their race. And we think that everybody's judging us, but it's really like most of that judgment comes from ourselves. And so you have to start with like, what are your self-limiting beliefs that you're agreeing with, that you have to change your language around, and to be careful. Like that's what I've learned, like be careful about what you're speaking to yourself out loud, or especially because your words have power. And even if you're just saying it to yourself, you're reinforcing those patterns. And so you have to look at those patterns and start from where you're at.
That is powerful, Tara. And yeah, number of things that you shared there. One, I will completely agree that it's far too easy to internalize what other people tell us, or if one starts believing those voices, then that becomes reality. At the same time, I think people around us, I think they sense the energy we are putting out. So if we put out positive energy, then people start believing in us more.
Right.
And the biggest supporter that we can find is ourselves. Like if we believe in ourselves, then we can be our own champion. Amongst these sea of voices, those people who were calling you whatever, the DNFer, that's pretty funny. The DNFer lady, and maybe other people who didn't believe in you. Were there actually some people that you found a support group who continued to provide encouragement in your goal, in your training, in your fight against your health challenges? I can sense that, Lisa, your coach, was one of them.
Right.
Were there others? And they could maybe online, in person?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the time too, I had a doctor who was really supportive and encouraging, and that really helped. And then I think there were, there are other runners that supported me that like kind of knew my whole background of challenges. And then also like, looking at like, who are you comparing yourself to? Because if I can only finish 30 miles of a 50-mile race, that's still more than most of the world population has ever done. But we tend to like go and compare ourselves to, the elite runners that are finishing in superhuman times. And like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm not as good as these people, or maybe I'm one of the last ones to finish, but I still finished something that most of the world hasn't even attempted. So it's like, but I found, I have some real friends, and, our real, like, we kind of have like an inner circle, and those people tend to be really small for most of us. like people that really, really know us. But I've always had like a few of those friends that, they don't care if I finish or not. They're going to support me no matter what. They're going to support my dreams because they really care about me as a human being. And so I found the people that, through some of the faith groups I'm involved in, I do a lot of prayer. I do a lot of prayer walking. Then I have some really good friends. In fact, one of them came out and crewed me for this race. And so those are the people that I think like have really believed in me that, maybe if I am having a bad day and can call and say, hey, I'm believing these lies in my head, so talk me out of it. Give me some other feedback. Because sometimes we do need people to bounce stuff out to like, get those things out of our head. So, but it's really people that are aligned with, as I've gotten older and I've gone through a lot of my own healing work, I've found that it's really important to have people that are not just supportive, but kind of are aligned with the same like mindset of like you can accomplish anything, that aren't going to like baby you, but aren't going to put up, I guess, with those negative things like you tell yourself. They're going to be like sympathetic and encouraging, but they're not going to let you stay there.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, I want to now get into your story of transformation. So from that day when you were at the start of the Ultra as a spectator, and you made this commitment to yourself. So talk to us about how that year of training looked like, because what I can see is you were in some ways trying to climb two different mountains. You were trying to train for this 100-mile plus marathon. Plus, you were also trying to get yourself in shape to be able to, and when I say shape, I mean just lose or get back to that type of body mass that would even allow you to train properly. So again, most people who are battling that kind of medical condition, for them, the advice typically is, hey, you start losing some pounds, and then maybe in a couple of years, you might be able to go out and, run a few miles with your friends, right? But you were trying to run this huge ultramarathon in 1 year, right? So talk to us about how that planning for that race look like. What goals, milestones, structure did you create for yourself, Tara?
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together, training, aging, mindset, and awe. You will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
Well, I committed that when Lisa said that she would train me again. I had one thing that I had realized is that before I had sometimes I wasn't perfect on my training. I mean, we're all not perfect on our training, but sometimes I let other things take priority over like what my vision was. We have a lot of distractions. So I decided that, I made a commitment and like, okay, if she's going to be willing to like put herself out there and give me that, then I'm going to give at least 100% back. So I made that commitment that no matter what, to the best of my ability, I was going to follow her schedule and not let distractions get in the way, if that was my goal. So I really like had a commitment to staying focused this time. And I've also learned how to not be controlled by my emotion. Like in the past, emotion sometimes controls our decisions. That I've really learned how to not be controlled by my emotion. In that year, I lost a brother to suicide last March. We're coming up on his 1 year anniversary. And in the past, maybe the way I would have dealt with that was to, like, I'm not going to train like everything is, I would have like let that take me out for a month. But that was like a challenge to this mindset of like, there's nothing I can do about this. So I'm going to use this pain to like go out and give it 100% and stay focused. And I did. I stayed focused through that. So that was, I guess, the big change that has happened in me, is that I've realized that like you have to focus on, if this is a priority, then, it's not that like I didn't like, I mean, I had to go back for the services. There may have been a day or two that had to be adjusted, but I didn't let it take me out for a month or 3 months, or, I kind of utilized my training to like work through those emotions.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, that is a deep belief system change that you incorporated. And I do want to get more into the mental side of your preparation beyond just this, but just for the just to get a sense of how you broke down this this huge task ahead of you into, let's say, manageable pieces, because you had this goal a year down the line. So maybe to give us a sense, could you walk us through, let's say, a week in the life of Tara?
Now or
As
then?
she's back then, we're still
then?
in that journey. So 1 week in the life of Tara, as she is, heads down, fully focused, training for this goal. What were you? What was your routine like? What were you eating or not eating? How were you physically training? The running, maybe non-running type of work that you were putting in. Please walk us through that.
Well, so for me, I made a really big commitment with my diet. For a year and a half, I cut out all wheat and all refined sugar. And I'm not saying everybody has to do that. But for me, like, it helped me cut out all the processed food. And I'm kind of a like all or nothing. So if I'm going to go through it, it helps me to like there was just certain types of food that I just committed not to eat for that. Like basically, I mean, I guess it was like I was fasting from those food groups, but then I added in more nutrient dense foods, higher protein, and I was committed to that. So for me, that was like just having that kind of commitment. Like there's a lot of food where I work, a lot of unhealthy foods, and culturally there's a lot of pressure like to eat with everybody else. So it just like that was part of my discipline. Was I got used to saying no, and at first I think it like bothered people, but now they've just gotten used to it. Like, oh, Tara doesn't eat that. But now I've actually added some of that back in because I found that I need some of that to feel my performance as I've gotten closer to my maintenance weight. But that was like the biggest thing is I changed some of my dietary habits and started making better choices and was really strict with it. And then I started moving more. So I started getting up earlier.
I would love to learn a bit more about your diet strategies. it's so difficult to give up certain foods, and it's so challenging to stop partaking in, let's say, eating family traditions, because I think there is this myth that we are told that eating together keeps families together. I feel
Um,
like, yes, that's true to some degree, but exceptions need to be made.
right.
So how difficult was it, in real terms? What were those foods that you cut out? And you talked about cutting out certain carbs, cutting out sugar. Any hacks that you employ? Did you go out and just throw all the junk food, all the bread into, you know, the trash can? How did you manifest that?
Well, I mean, I live in a very tiny house, so I don't have the ability to keep a lot of food in my house. Um, but where it's been a struggle is I work in a tribal community, and so there's a lot of homemade tortillas and yeast bread and things like that. That a lot of processed foods. There's no grocery store in my where I live currently, so I had to learn how to. I started implementing a lot of I still use like protein supplementation, but I also started finding that okay, there are certain things like if I go to a gas station, I can find a little container of chicken breast that's just plain chicken breast and eat that. Just because I only have a gas station available, I don't have to go buy all the chips. So I started just making like high protein choices, more whole choices of what's available here. There's a little meat market here, a little Hispanic meat market. I can go there. I can get just some plain carne asada or something like that. I don't have to eat all the bread with it. And so that's how I started. Is I started just cutting out. I cut out wheat because that really I think helped me eliminate a lot of the less calorie dense foods that you tend to not realize how much calories you're actually consuming. And I don't know, just the way that my mind works, like I have to kind of keep it simple as far as like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And so once I commit to it, it's like, okay, if this isn't on the list, then I just, I stopped craving it after a while.
Yeah, sorry. Were you talking of calories? Were you keeping a calorie counter, Tara? Were you using an app? Were there some tools you employed to manage
Um,
your intake?
in the beginning, I wasn't, but then I had tried, I went through a couple month period where I was trying this Octavia method that was not good for my training, but I did lose a lot of weight on it. But then I realized like this is not optimal for a runner. And then I started working with Advanced Nutrition Solutions using, and they use First Form. So I started using the First Form app at one point, and it does track calories, but it's more geared towards like macro goals. And I found that that's really useful for me. And I still track it because I want to know like what's going to fuel a best performance. So I started like at one point getting in like I get at least 140 grams of protein in per day. And then I, when I was still actively trying to lose weight, I wasn't like low carb, but I was probably on the lower carb end. But just having that accountability, I worked with some nutrition coaches through that, and that really helped me just having some structure. But I think it was about December this year, I finally started adding back in wheat because once I got to my goal weight, I had a hard time like I needed the weight loss to stop and I was continuing to lose weight. So I added back in some of those food groups, but now I still track my macros. I I actually just had a consultation with them because I found out my insurance will cover nutrition dietitians. That I found a dietitian that is a sports nutritionist and also an ultra runner that I just did a consultation with because I want, now I'm like looking at, I want to feel for optimal performance for, I want to maintain my weight, but I also I want to see how fast I can get, how far I can go I found that like when you're still in weight loss mode, it's really hard to gain a lot of speed. I mean, I did get faster just because I was losing the weight and consistent in my training, but now since I've hit maintenance, I'm a lot faster than I was when I finished that 140-mile race, even in just a few months, because I'm not trying to lose weight. I'm eating more maintenance calories, and I've really, I guess, like part of my mindset that's changed is now I view food is not the enemy, but food is fuel, and you need food to optimize. You need the right kind of macros, and you need the right kind of nutrients. And I've increased my carbohydrate consumption quite a bit. But when I was losing initially, I did go lower carbohydrate because it was easier to lose weight that way.
Yeah, food can be a double-edged sword, right? But really, that loving relationship to what we eat is so important. I mean, we were designed to use our food as fuel, and it is unfortunate how modern society has veered so far away from that fundamental truth. The other thing you said was, you were completely changing your diet. At the same time, you had to start putting in work towards training for running to do 140 miles. So maybe now talk to us a little bit about what did those weeks and months leading to the race look like in terms of time spent on the track, time spent training physically to be ready?
Well, I would get up. I still get up probably about 5 o'clock in the morning. I do like a morning prayer call over Zoom. A lot of times I was walking during that time. So like if I have a meeting online, I would walk during the meeting and listen in. I'd get as much walking as I could. So I'd walk in the morning. We have where I work, we're able to, not in addition to our lunch hour, we have an hour that we can use for wellness hour. So I would use my lunch hour, I'd use my wellness hour to walk. I'd pull a tire. So a lot of times I wasn't just walking, I was walking with the tire attached. Yeah, so I've kind of gotten famous around town because everybody sees me pulling my tire. everybody get, and for a while, everybody would get concerned if they saw me walking without my tire. Where's your tire? So like, and I mean, I guess that was part of the people that encouraged me because I'm an example for the community I work for. I live in a community where there's a lot of obesity, a lot of diabetes, a lot of addiction. And, so that's part of like my motivation is like, it's for me, I look at it as like I'm responsible to be my best self because I'm trying to teach people here how to be their best selves. And so, like, inspiring those around me. And I've gotten other people to, start working out, start walking, start taking charge of your health. And we brought Lisa here last year and we did a fitness camp. We're bringing her here again in about a month. And, for me, that was also part of motivation of I have to finish this race because everybody here is watching and I'm inspiring them. They've seen my transformation from when I was 270 to now. And now some of them, it's giving them hope. Like, well, maybe I can do it too, because look at where you were at 2 years ago. And that's kind of what motivates me to keep going too, is like, I've got responsibility to live it out, to walk my talk and to be an encouragement to those around me.
Wow, Tara, that is amazing. Other people are, I don't know what they're doing on their lunch breaks, humdrum things. You are out there pulling a tire behind you in the face of these people around you who are surprised, perhaps maybe even just a little bit scornful. Or what is this woman
Like, what's she
doing?
doing?
What is she up to? But then, you continued with your resolve, with your plan, and you managed to turn these critics into your accountability group. So the same people, wow, this is so amazing. Like you basically changed these people and how they viewed not only what you're doing, but now you are changing their lives and you're having this influence on them. Yeah, this is amazing. And then now you're bringing Lisa on to maybe take things to the next level and get people on this further down this road into fitness and whatnot. As you were doing this training, one thing I also noticed is that a lot of this training and your diet, it begins with taking, let's say, easy small steps, easy small wins, simple changes you made to your diet, even choosing the right type of foods when you didn't have a choice at the gas station. Like, one thing I love about your story is, like, it's not like you suddenly uprooted yourself and moved into some training camp high up in Colorado. You
Right.
were able to incorporate these changes into your life. And I think there's a profound lesson here for the everyday person, that one can realize huge dreams in their everyday lives by consistency without completely changing who they are. What might have been some of the toughest or maybe darkest moments? I am I'm sure there were at least a couple of times in that 1 year where perhaps the training, the changes, the discipline could have felt overwhelming. Were there times, Tara, when you're like, oh my goodness, this is just too difficult? How am I going to make this change happen? And how am I going to show up for that race and make sure I complete it?
Well, I think, there was a couple. I think one was losing my brother. That was really tough, where I had to like work through, I think, a lot of like, I just don't want to get up and train today, but I made this commitment, so I'm gonna do it anyway because it's not helping my brother. My brother's already gone. It's not helping him to sit around in my grief. But the other point, I had attempted a 50 miler in June, and it was the last 50. It was the Snow Peaks 50 in Utah. I'd finished that race 5 times, but it was the last race I ever attempted in 2019 that I didn't finish. So I had it in my head that I was going to finish that race. Like, that was my comeback race. The race I didn't finish, I'm going to go finish now. Well, I found that when I got there, I had probably lost, I think I was down to about, let's see, I'd probably lost close to 70, 80 pounds at that point, maybe. So I was maybe like a little over at a halfway point. But I think I was underfeeling a bit at that point. And I just found like my speed wasn't high enough to, like, I couldn't, like, I started early and I still, with like all the elevation climbs and everything, I just wasn't fast enough. And I got to the halfway point and I was just like, I'm not even gonna, like, there was one more climb. And so that was like really discouraging. Like, that was in June. Like, how am I gonna do this 140-mile race when I can't even do 2.5 miles an hour for this race? And everybody's passing me. And so that was like kind of a dark point for me, but it was also, I think, a wake up call. Like, you can't like underfuel so much that like that's going to affect your performance. So I started looking at my fueling. It was like, I think in that time that I started actually tracking my macros more accurately and figuring out that I actually needed to eat. I think I actually increased my calorie intake at that point, realizing that it's like, okay, if you underfuel that much, that's like part of your problem. Like, you've got to fix your fueling. And then the other part of it was, even though I was sticking with my training schedule, I realized that I could also put a lot more effort like into like the types of train I'm doing. And, and I started doing more like challenging my heart rate zone. I'm challenging my speed at that point, because just so that was like a dark point, like how am I going to do this? But it was also like a kind of a catalyst of like, okay, let's kick it into higher gear because this race now is only a few months away and you got to fix something or you're going to have a repeat story here.
Sure. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about the mental training as well. Were there some techniques or some things you were doing to, again, build up that toughness? Because whatever I've heard about doing these super long ultras, I'm not a runner. And people tell me that, it really comes down to the mind, that it's all mental. And of course, it seems like you have this gift of resolve, of being determined. But were there any specific things you were doing to toughen yourself up?
I think really putting into practice that, I guess, a leader that I follow, Jennifer Leclerc, that's who I do like my prayer stuff through, that she's got like a lot of really good teachings on just like changing your mindset, like from a spiritual perspective. And I kind of view her as more of like almost like a spiritual military leader
Okay.
with a heart. So I really I've gone to some of her conferences and stuff. So like I would actually like listen to a lot of things on some of those runs that like reinforce that mindset and changing how you think of it, like challenging those specific things, like getting out of the victim mindset, like getting out of like stop saying things that are contrary to what you're wanting to give life to. And so I started listening to it and then I would start implementing it. So like that's I think how I kind of changed my mindset mentally, is like just constantly reinforcing that you have to like align your mind with what you're wanting to do, and you have to stop giving power to like those thoughts are going to come, the doubts are going to come, but you have to learn how to not give power to it. You have to learn how to not go off of your emotion, like just because you feel something. And I mean that doesn't mean like not listening to your body, and if you're really injured then you need to pay attention to that, but those things that that come up in your mind, like, why do you really need to do this? Like,
Yeah. It sounds like your deep spiritual practice was a strong force in helping you stay focused, stay consistent, and yeah, helping you battle past some of the darkest moments of your journey. I mean, yes, not just in the training itself, but even in all those years that have brought you to where you are today. Let's talk about race day. You had trained for this, you had lost the weight, you had overcome all these odds. But on race day, it's all real, right? So what was going through your mind at the start as you were on the line ready to go?
I think it was just like I have to do this, and I have a responsibility to do this. And like there's also like a fear that comes up with that, like what if I can't? But I had to I was really committed to like not letting that take over, that this whole race I was never gonna, the words I want to quit were never gonna come out of my mouth, and that I wasn't gonna complain the whole time. Because like once you start doing that, then that gives a bigger space in your mind. And so like I was really committed to that. And I don't know, it was a way different race than it ever has been in the past. Like my mindset was totally different. So there really was at no point at this race where I had that thought that I'm going to quit, because I had already been practicing and predetermined, like that's just not an option. Like you have to do this. There's people, and there's people where I work, people in the community I'm part of now, that are relying on me. Like they're putting their hopes on me finishing. Like they need that inspiration. So I have to do it.
Oh, wow. Got it. So you had gotten your entire community to buy into this mission of yours, and you were in some ways championing their hopes and dreams.
Right.
So did they actually join you? Like, did some of these people from the tribe or the community come to the race day with you?
They didn't come to the race, but there were a lot of people tracking me online that were watching me online. And,
Okay.
I was given little updates here and there too, like when I could, just like through my Facebook. But like there were people watching, and it's like they needed to see me finish. They needed to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this became so much bigger than just Tara doing this
Right.
race. It became larger than you, and maybe that was this one subtle but catalyzing difference in this race versus your prior races. Okay, so now you are in the race itself. Talk to us about how the miles felt like. Were you feeling that you were performing at the level that you expected to with your training? Were there points where this felt way harder? Talk to us about how deep you had to dig.
Well, I think by this race, I had figured out that like staying on top of nutrition was a big deal. So I had a really good friend that was crewing me that I told, like, make sure I'm getting at least 200 calories an hour, make sure I'm drinking this much. So she was like really good. So I couldn't have done it, I think, without that support. I had my parents also with me who had come up, and then at one point they switched out for, like, I have an aunt and uncle that came up. So I had like a really supportive crew that made a big difference. But I think the parts where I struggled was I really hate cold. I do better in the heat and the cold. I trained through the summer here in Arizona, and I don't care how hot it is. I would much rather train in the heat. So it was cold. And the first night I really struggled, and I got really tired at one point, and I realized, and so I did stop for about 30 minutes at one point, just because I was finding like I was fatigued, but it was because I was cold, is what I figured out. But then when I would lay down, like I couldn't sleep, because as soon as I lay down, like my legs would start cramping up and everything. And so then I'm like, okay, might as well just get out and go again. So I think the first night was really the struggle for me, where I lost some time because I had wanted to be a lot faster the first 100 miles. I had wanted to hit mile 100 closer to 30 hours. I didn't hit it till 36 hours. But it was largely because I lost a lot of, like, that first night was a struggle. I had to work through a lot that first night with the cold and figuring that out. And I think once I got to Kingman, there was a stretch between Peach Springs and Kingman that I think that was really actually the biggest struggle for me, was that stretch. And then, but once I got out of Kingman, I think once I hit the 100-mile part, there was something. Once I hit the 100-mile point, and I realized that, okay, it's not as fast as I wanted, but I've still got over 20 hours still got 24 hours to finish the last 40 miles. Like, that's very doable. Like, it kind of, like, I think sparked a release in me of like, okay, I am fast enough to finish this, because that was always the thing too. I have had so many races in the past where I just wasn't fast enough, that like that was I think one of the bigger challenges, that am I going to be even fast enough, or am I just going to like DNF because I timed out? Like, I really didn't want that to happen. So that was like a big stress. And once I hit 100 miles and realized that, okay, I still have 24 hours left to do this last 40 miles, I'm going to finish. Like, I don't know, something changed, and I just suddenly had a lot of energy for the rest of the time. The last 40 miles were probably, even though I was fatigued, I had a lot more like focus. I was just like, okay, this is going to happen.
Okay. 100 miles in, through that first part, you were hitting highs, and then you got to the slow point. But then the last 40 miles, you found this renewed wind, and you found this energy store. It boggles my mind again. You were an entire day in. How long did it take to complete the race, Tara?
I was just around 56 and a half hours.
Wow. So for 56 and a half hours, you ran or walked pretty much the whole time. Did you bonk at any time? Was there some, like, I hear of people in those epic races, sometimes people can fall asleep as they're moving. Did you have any of those crazy moments of
Um,
fatigue?
yeah, I think when I was approaching Kingman, I had done pretty good at staying on top of like my carbohydrates, but I wasn't getting enough like real food in. And so around Kingman, I was kind of struggling. And so I started, and my dad had boiled some eggs, and that was like my stomach was like, I couldn't get any food down without gagging. Like everything just tasted gross. But for some reason, like just plain boiled eggs with nothing on them, no salt, no nothing. Like if I stopped and ate an egg, I could get eggs down. So that really helped. And then I think um, the last few miles, because I really like I had been relying on pale wind, coconut water. I'd been doing a little bit of a protein shake at some point, but like I just like nothing tasted good. And then I found out it's a 140-mile course, but it's actually closer to 141 and a half. And when you're like that far in, like it just feels like an eternity. And I remember my uncle, I remember kind of joking with him. I signed up for a 140-mile race, so I'm going to stop exactly at 140 and they could come get me. So I remember those last few miles, just like I signed up for 100. I didn't sign up for a 141-mile race.
Oh gosh.
But
Oh
then
no, I believe it. You know, when in your mind, like you have taken on this massive task, and at some point, you know, like you're like, okay, this is exactly what I'm going to do, and your whole being is committed to this one specific goal. And if something exceeds it, it just feels it feels like unfair. You know, it just feels so gross.
Yeah.
Anyway, you managed to complete the entire thing.
Yeah.
For this beautiful change, you shifted the trajectory. You did not DNF. You actually finished the race. How did it feel, Tora, when you crossed that finish line after running 140 miles? Actually, sorry, 141 and a half miles to complete.
Well, it was to me, it was like I felt like I had like an accumulation of all the struggles that I believe that I've conquered, but you have to have like a challenge before you know that you really conquered it. So for me, it was like that was the proof that I really did conquer like some of those old mindsets, some of those things that those self-limiting beliefs and, you know, a lot of those struggles, like that was like, okay, I really did conquer that. And here's the proof that I conquered it because I was able to finish it. I was able to stay committed. I was able to stay focused. And I didn't slip into that mindset of like trying to talk myself into quitting. I never once on the course, those words never came out of my mouth. So I was able to honor like that commitment that I made to myself. So it was just like, it felt amazing, like almost unbelievable that I actually did what I said I was going to do and stayed committed and have been more committed in my training than, you know, have been more structured and more disciplined. I think that's really what it is like, you know, I've become a lot more disciplined.
Absolutely. Mind, body, lifestyle, mental, like everything came together to help you complete this race and this moment, and what was the reaction from your support group?
They were just, I think that some of them were more excited than I was. Like, I know, like my uncle, my uncle's a funny guy. He's from Panama originally. And my aunt is only like 6 years older than me, so they're like closer in age. But he kind of came in and was my crew, and he was so amazed. He was like, I've never known anybody that done anything like this, and I didn't know if we'd have to take you to the hospital afterwards, how it'd be. So for him to see, like, not only had I finished, but like I was walking around and I was eating, and I didn't know if we were gonna have to take you to the emergency room or whatever, like, because it was just like so unbelievable, the thought of, so for a lot of people around me, like the thought of doing anything that distance, like it's just like unbelievable.
Like I said, Tora, like I'm not a runner, but many years ago, out on a whim, I did like an off the couch like half marathon, and one of the most fun things was after the race ended. It was pretty tough for me, I'll admit, but we went and treated ourselves to this huge stack of pancakes. So I'm curious, after this thing ended, did you have a nice treat to reward yourself with?
Well, it's funny because about a mile and a half before the finish, I was like struggling with my energy, and my aunt had a turkey sandwich in the car, and I don't even like turkey, but I said, okay, I'll try it. And like, I guess my body really needed it because I ate like that half of that sandwich. And then I suddenly had energy, and I actually ran into the finish line. Like my speed picked up, and I ran uphill to the finish line. And then after I sat down, I was just like, she was like, well, you want the other half of that sandwich? And so I ate it, but I hadn't like had bread in like a year and a half at that point. So I ate that sandwich, and then I don't I know I was really tired. So I don't remember anything actually like wanting food for like much food for that first night. We went to the after feast celebration and I ate some of it, but I think my body was still kind of like in shock at that point. So it kind of took until I went to bed, and then the next morning, my friend who had crewed me and driven up with me, we drove over to Lake Havasu, and there's this casino and restaurant that's over on the other side of the Lake Havasu, and you have to take a ferry from that side to get there. And I had remembered that, oh, they have this like Frito, this, what do they call it? I don't remember the name of it, but it's like Fritos with beans and stuff on it. it's like a Frito pie, a Frito pie. And I don't know why, but I had that at that restaurant one time before, and it was only 15 miles out. I said, we need to go to the restaurant because I need to go get that Frito pie. So I think that's what I ate the next day.
Yeah. Hey, whatever, obscure and delicious treat that you wanted for yourself, doesn't matter what it might be, but you certainly earned it and more. One of the things that stand out to me as we wrap up this conversation is how you were steadfast in advocating for yourself, particularly given your health condition with POTS. Many of us, when we are given a certain diagnosis with experts who seem to know way more about these things than we do, we will go and believe them as we are taught to. When doctors say, hey, if you're sick, don't do ABC things, or if you have these issues, stop doing these things. But you had this inner resolve, this commitment to champion yourself and go after your goals. And I'm curious, like, if you have a message for others who are also battling medical conditions and they are told to stop moving, or they are told that, hey, you may only be able to do ABC things, even though you dream of doing XYZ things. What have you learned from your journey, and what would you like to share with others?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you got to find the right support that aligns with what you're dreaming. So, not every doctor will say the same thing. So I went and found a doctor that could see my vision and support my vision. And I went through several doctors before I could find the right doctor when I was diagnosed with POTS that really even understood my condition, but that also had like the expertise, like, hey, actually, what you're doing and running is probably actually benefiting you. Where other doctors who maybe didn't have the understanding, but also they don't want to be sued, they don't want to whatever, so they're going to always give you like the more conservative advice. So you got to find the right people that align with your beliefs instead of accepting and just changing yourself. But I see like I look for stories and look for people that have overcome things like that to see, and they're out there. So I will go find those stories. I'll go listen to those stories and say, hey, if this person did it, then it's a possibility. So there's got to be a way, because our bodies are smart. Our bodies adapt, our minds adapt, and there's so much that we don't understand, and there's so much in science that isn't 100%. There's a lot of guesswork in science. So, we don't have to, we have to be smart, but we also don't have to accept everything at first hand without that. Sometimes there's a lot of ways that we can adapt to make things work. If I've got a dream, I might have to adapt some things that maybe this person that doesn't have the same struggle doesn't have to, but like, that's okay. I don't need to compare myself. I need to find what works for me, what's going to accomplish this dream with, the way that I have to do it. And it's okay to adapt and it's okay to adjust.
Badass, Dora. You had this conviction and you went far and beyond in searching for the truth. And you were also smart about it. And you sought out the help of experts. And you taught yourself on how to train correctly, how to adapt. And look how far you've come. And one question I wanted to ask you a little bit different, which is I have never personally experienced being overweight. And perhaps many people listening haven't either. But I can sense that living in a larger body in a society can come with unique challenges. So what was the experience before your transformation? And then how did the way people treat you, or maybe even you treat yourself after you lost that weight, how did that change? And was there something that surprised about the shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think the people who really know me, I don't think anything's really changed other than like they think what I did was awesome. The people who love me have always loved me. But it was interesting for me because, when I moved to Arizona, I pretty much left all the support and all the life that I had before behind, other than my immediate family who's always known me. And I like created a new life here. So none of the people in Arizona ever saw me when I was an athlete before. They only knew me overweight. So I think what I noticed is I don't think it's been so much of an issue with the tribe because culturally, like weight isn't as big of a deal, like in the tribal culture. A lot of people are overweight. And so I don't think that's ever really been an issue here. But outside of that, yeah, I definitely notice like people are more dismissive. Like when you're overweight, people don't take you seriously. And then like I've noticed a shift in some people in some situations where like, yeah, people respect you more. People like take you more seriously. But also it's been kind of like entertaining for me to observe people's reactions because the people that never saw me when I was fit before, like I go into places and people don't recognize me now because I look so different now than I did when I was at my heaviest weight. I had a lot of, not just the weight, but a lot of inflammation in my face. It distorted a lot of my features And then, like, I've been into places where people just don't recognize me, and then finally they figure out that who I am, and they're like, "What happened?" So I think, yeah, I mean, I think there is a difference. There are biases, and a lot of times, like, people don't even realize they have them. It's just the way that our culture has conditioned them. They don't even realize they're doing it. But so it's been interesting. It's been an
Sure.
interesting observation.
Tara, you have already done something which is honestly mind-bending. What's next? Are there bigger goals on the horizon?
Well, I have a really big goal this year that I haven't really announced other than to Lisa, that I want to do the Route 66 double this year. So I want to do the official course, and then I want to go back to the start line, do 280.
Well, maybe 283 to be
Yeah, it would be
precise.
283 to be precise.
Well, that is amazing, Tara. Folks, you heard it here first. Thanks for taking us into confidence. We will be cheering for you the whole way. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Tara. It was such a pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless. Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.